Oh, wait, somebody's coming. There's Ed. We just said we can have people again.
10 minutes ago, I realized you guys are live.
It's not as going to be as spectacular as you think it could be.
We're a little rough
Last year.
tonight, Ed.
It's a little rougher than that.
You must have been the other person.
Exactly.
There's two of us, sometimes three, don't know who that person was.
This is after.
We're just trying
us
to get
figure out
technology to
how shut
work.
the elevator.
Okay. It is 6:40, July 13th for the Finance and Facilities meeting. Board members present, Burl Pickle Antonio, Matt Campbell, and Daphne Morney. Okay, I guess we're going to start with an update as far as the June financials are.
Okay, let me share screen.
They can't see what you're
Hmm.
sharing. Well, because so in a regular board meetings, our plan is to use the screen. We just have no tech support tonight. I can turn here.
I
I'll
can
turn
just,
my-
okay.
I'll be online later.
Well, all the reports can be, obtained online. So, we can put those out there and be published. So if there's any questions or people want to review things. So it's pretty much the standard package that we put together on a monthly basis. If we look at the final year results and the first four columns here, group it by quarters. And as you can see, revenues, we historically, there's a pattern of inflows and expenditures are more consistent on a monthly, quarterly basis. So July to September is when we receive the bulk of our revenue due to collection of taxes. The October-December period is when we will typically see our rollback in homestead, and same thing with April and June. Tax revenues also January to March. So there's a huge increase in those 2 quarters of revenues. And then they balance out for what's projected for the year. On the expenditure side, those are more consistent on a quarter-to-quarter basis. If you look at total expenditures for Q1, July to September, there's a slight increase into Q2, Q3, and then Q4. And that's typically consistent too with historical patterns. We would see new contracts going into place, which would tend to increase cost when that occurs, and then some additional spending throughout the year and towards the end of the year, gearing up for next year. On a year-to-date basis, revenues, operating revenues, about 4.6 million over estimates, 8 million, 8.2 over prior year, primarily due to the passage of the levy in November, because those would not have been previously estimated until the levy actually passes. And then we had some unusual items that we've discussed for the last several months, the $2 million in bond premium receipts from the sale of the bonds and the COPS issue, and then the $3 million transfer in to fund the cash reserve account that we are building over the next several years. On the expenditure side, fairly close to estimates, but underrunning in fairly close, almost on target for salaries and wages. Fringe benefits were under, again, primarily due to the lower than expected increase in healthcare costs. Purchase services were down, mostly in the area of substitutes and other instructional related activities, because we were more virtual than being actually in school this past year, because we had anticipated that we would have been back in school for the FY21 school year. Materials and supplies, somewhat consistent, a $2 million increase in operational fees. That was the expenditure related to the receipt on the sale of premium for bonds and COPS for the issuance cost. So overall, close to estimates on expenditures, and we had a net $11.1 million surplus for the year in the general fund.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So we,
Oh. Can you just talk about two line items? The capital outlay, we spent more than we budgeted. And it looks like in transfers, advances out, there was an increase of $740 some dollars in June. What was that related to?
Well, at the end of the year, we had additional transfers out for advances over and above what I expected. The capital outlay, we had to move some dollars from ESER funds that were spent in ESER 2. Since the budget has not yet been approved by the state, we're kind of restricted from actually expending those funds until it's approved. So we had started to place purchase orders, but that restriction then caused us to move those back to the general fund in the short term.
And that relates to transfer?
The ESER money, the funds from the federal government to help with the.
Are you talking about the ESER affecting the transfers?
The ESER affected capital outlay because we had capital dollars that were spent for ESER, which we had to move back to general fund temporarily.
So it's a temporary?
Yes, we will move those back out once the budget is approved. The fund actually allows you to spend money back to March of 2020. So we can take the 4.3 million, say for ESER 2, and we can reach back into prior years and actually apply dollars to that. But there's an odd requirement that if the budget has not yet been approved, you're not allowed to actually expend the funds. So we jumped the gun a little bit in processing those purchase orders. So to remain compliant, we adjusted it in June and we will move it back in July. The second chart shows 5 years of actuals. I think what's telling here is, revenues are increasing. Primarily in the area of taxes. And as a percent of total receipts from operations, we continue to see an increase in the local operating income share. So we went from 77.9 to 78.3% for this fiscal year. Not a huge increase, but that just shows that the burden on the local taxpayers is increasing annually. And state sources have, decreased slightly again over that same period. Skip the bank reconciliations. Okay. These are statements related to investments that we have. This details out the various, money that's in cash account. Star Ohio is a state fund which pays 8 basis points. So we always keep cash in there to be available for short-term needs. There are agency bonds, commercial paper, negotiable certificates of deposit. And again, this is just all the detail supporting the 23.2 million that we have on account with meter. The summary of all cash at the end of June, we had $309.6 million on hand. The bulk of that is sitting in the construction funds. So the 2018 bond fund is down to 4.3 million. That will be exhausted shortly by the end of August, I'd say. And then all the other bond funds proceeds relative to the new construction at the various elementaries, middle schools, and the new high school. So that those will remain on our books for the next 3 to 4 years as we apply those to construction costs. As far as other investments, money market funds, the meter funds are all detailed out here. And you can kind of see where we have them invested in terms of timeline. So 19.6 million is sitting in cash, which is current. 130 million that it will expire in this coming fiscal year. And again, a lot of that is tied to the draw schedule related to construction. So to the extent we've identified a need for funds, we tend to invest to have those funds available at the time that the bills would be due and payable. I'm going to skip ahead to a chart here, page 30. It should have been after that prior chart. Okay. This is a summary of the expenditure authority by all funds for the fiscal year. So if you take the outstanding encumbrances as of last year, that provided spending authority for fiscal year 21. In addition, we would add the appropriations, which were approved at the end of June for all accounts. All funds. That gives the total spending authority. And then from that, you would deduct outstanding encumbrances and actual expenditures to come up with the total expended. The last column is the available appropriation. Those numbers must be zero or positive because we're not allowed to have any negative balances. So this just shows that, based upon the adjustments we made to the various funds at the end of June, everything reconciled to where we don't have any negatives. Any questions on those charts?
So I don't have a question. I just know that at our last meeting, I had asked the question about the one investment that our year, and you followed up, but I think it would be good to just share in the public setting, because we asked the question in the public setting about the, the name.
The taxes. Net taxes.
Net taxes. Do you want to cover that?
Yes. So I want Peter to ask what the the rationale for investment was, number one, because it had a higher amount. It was like 6%
Yes.
of the total portfolio, and that was a question from you. One of the issues we have today is that the amount of commercial paper that's available in the market is not nearly as great as it used to be. So when you have an issuer issuing new paper and you have funds to invest, there aren't very many options. So the decision was made to put a slightly higher amount into that because it was available. He also sent me a research report on the firm, and there were no real red flags associated with Metaxas. It is a highly rated company. And in order for us to invest in it, it must be of the highest grade. So in reviewing that report, there wasn't anything that stood out that said they potentially might have a cash reserve issue or something in terms of repayment, because commercial paper is theoretically at some risk. There's a minimal amount of market risk, but there is, certainly some credit risk, because if a firm did happen to default, that is something where a loss could occur. But again, we're limited to investing in only the highest grade companies that would almost never foreseeably happen.
And I did have one more question. As I looked through the reports, there was about $20,000 check to Solar Advocate Development, which made me wonder, maybe we should ask to have as a agenda item, an update on the whole solar program that was started 10 years ago or something like that. I don't know. I would appreciate it. Would you too? So.
I think that's timely, especially given that we are reconstructing buildings. The buildings that exist today that have solar panels on the roof, that will certainly not be the case in the future. So, that will affect the whole program.
Okay, we're going to move on to facilities and construction. Oh, yes.
She can't see that.
Can't see the people.
Oh, I'm sorry. In terms of the forecast?
In our reserve, how many days of cash?
When we added the 3 million.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, right now, based on the forecast, we were showing about 77 days. The forecast that was done in May varies slightly from the actuals because obviously the 2 months didn't match up exactly. So we have slightly higher than that, maybe about 80 days, 80 plus days cash on hand. Okay, next is the facilities. I just have one chart. Mr. Lofton is not available to give an update on like building or programs, but Mr. Barrett may be able to do so if he has information on the status of the projects. I have something relative to spending versus the initial draw schedule, but
You want to do that first, Mike, and then I can.
Did you want to go, Steve?
Yeah, I can go. Sure. Good evening, everyone. Am I echoing? Okay. I think I'm not hearing it now. So I just want to talk a little bit about all the projects. We have 6 total projects. So the 2 additions at Blacklick and High Point, the 3 additions at the middle school, each middle school, and then the high school. So there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. We have met with Jefferson Township. We had an introductory meeting with Jefferson Township and the city just to talk about the zoning process, the timeline, when we need to submit documents, when they need to go before zoning, and just trying to be good partners. I know that the city and the township will both be good partners, and we want to make sure we have things in on time and that we're being, very thoughtful and thinking ahead. And so those meetings both went really well. The one we just had with the city happened the week before last. We are still engaged in the BOLD process. And you remember DLR has a process they call BOLD, which is Bridging Organizational Learning and Design. So looking at innovative, flexible, engaging design, but also looking at ways to train teachers and administrators in terms of professional development to use these new spaces. And so one of the things we did recently is about 15 high school teachers came in. They engaged in a process of visioning and looking at what could be. There was a lot of different groups meeting and talking about what good looks like, aspirational views of things, looking at different ways to use space. It was a very exciting meeting, and that group will continue to meet over the summer and do more visioning. We're also looking at visiting some facilities around the country and nearby to look at their innovative spaces to bring back some ideas. So one of the things that'll be happening soon is as we do the programming for the high school, we'll merge the documents from the BOLD sessions to look at the utilization and how we will redefine engagement. That may mean that we will adjust our vision, mission, and beliefs. So far, they're in keeping with all that's been talked about, but there may be some adjustment there as well. Estimators from Russilli and Turner are looking at the cost of the total budget. The cost of the total project. And right now, we're a little bit over. On the elementaries, we're under budget, and those designs are very close to being ready to go and to be presented to both the city and the township. Blacklick is in Jefferson Township and High Point is in Gahanna. And so that's really exciting. We had meetings with both teachers first and then parents at each building. And so teachers got to see the design. We also gave printouts shortly after so that they could look at things. When you're having an architect walk through a design, sometimes it's hard in a short session to really see what they're talking about. So teachers have the ability, parents have the ability to kind of drill down and look at the designs. And really the goal for the elementary schools and for the entire project is just to maximize dollars. In these additions, we want to make as much of the building look new and fresh as possible. So we want to stretch the dollars as much as possible. One of the things that we've had to sort of look at compromising on is building the academic wing first. It's what we're going to need first. Our growth is already here. And at both High Point and Blacklick, we're going to need bigger gym spaces because they'll both have another 225 students. And so it's going to be really important to have spaces for them. And we're going to be redeploying the gym space, the current gym space in other ways in both buildings. And so it's going to be really important that we do that with structural steel. There are other options, but really that's the best. And that is 10 to 12 months out in terms of ordering. So we can build the academic wings without structural steel. And again, the structural steel, there's just supply chain problems. During the pandemic, they stopped making it. And so now you have Amazon and all kinds of companies ordering structural steel. We will be putting our orders in soon. But that is the second half of the project. So the academic wings will be built by the fall of 22, and then the gym space will come online after the first of the year. And that's unfortunate, but it's just what we're up against in terms of the supply chain. We're in program development and schematic design for the high school. And in another couple of weeks, our architects and design team will be presenting us a real high-level schematic design. We'll cost that out in terms of the scope of the entire project. And so we're excited to see that. What they've been doing so far is they've been doing a lot of listening, and now they're taking what they heard and they're applying that to design. And we've had meetings every single week to talk with them. And they've been asking questions, throughout the process. And so we're really excited to see what they come up with. We're going to continue to look at the phasing of the construction projects. So the demolition part and the building part, and keeping in mind that we're going to have school while all this is happening. So that's a very complex process. So Russilli is working with DLR to do that in the most effective and least disruptive way possible. And so that's a big, tall order, and it's really important to us. One big concern is going to be parking for both construction workers, students, teachers. That's a problem we're going to have to solve. And so we're putting our heads together to look at ways to solve that issue. The sports complex out at Blacklick is under development. We're getting close on that. We're displacing softball fields and a practice field and tennis courts the space they're currently in at the high school is going to be needed for the new building. And so we'll be putting those out at Blacklick. And when we are ready to turn that in, we're hoping to be able to go through zoning at Jefferson Township with both the plans, the drainage plans, and all the things that we're going to need for the athletic complex. We're hoping to submit that soon with the design for the elementary school at Blacklick. The middle school projects, the principals have been really engaged with the design team. They've been put on the back burner as we kind of push forward with the elementary school and the high school. They are almost ready for schematic design. And when the principals come back on July 20th, we'll begin to re-engage with them. This process is really iterative, and what's really tough sometimes to understand is, like, when we were working on Lincoln Elementary at one point, I think we were $4 million over budget, and a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of worries. But what we did was lots of value engineering, lots of debates on needs versus wants. And we ended up with a beautiful, stunning elementary school, and we were about $500,000 under budget. So this process is very iterative. There's lots and lots of discussion about, adding things, taking things away. The key is to maximize our design potential and come in under budget. And I'm sure we'll be able to get there, even with the challenges of construction costs, labor costs, and material costs. Soon, we will be having some geotech meetings. Traffic studies are already underway. These geotech studies will, look at environmental concerns, and we will have security and sustainability workshops. DLR has a whole team that works on that, and we will be meeting with folks in the community. There were a number of folks that were concerned with the Lincoln Elementary project on sustainability, runoff, and those things. We'll invite those folks in for a discussion, and others who would like to be a part of that. Today, a number of members of our administrative team, they're in Idaho. They're looking at dome technology and consideration for a field house and maybe a performing arts center. And so they'll come back with some thoughts and ideas on that. This technology doesn't require structural steel, and it can be built in very affordable ways. So it's just something we wanted to kind of see and learn about. And so Jill and Scott Lofton, a couple members of our design team and our construction team are there looking at those this week. They'll be back Wednesday. We postponed our steering committee meeting this week until August 8th, where we'll have a lot to report. And I think at our August board meeting, we should have a presentation from our architects, our owner's rep, on where we are with these designs. I think we'll be able to do that. And we're also looking at building sponsorships for our career tech complex, or the wing of the building where those things will be. And so we've already met with Eastland Fairfield. We've shared some ideas. Kim Miller knows that our high school, we plan to bring it online in 2024. And so that's enough lead time to maybe bring some more satellite programs in Gahanna. Our architecture, our teaching professions, and our bioscience programs are very popular. We'd like to see more. And we're looking for ways to partner with, let's say we have a construction science area, maybe Rasili Construction or Turner Construction would sponsor that. So we're having discussions about that as well. And also, Dennis Bain from DLR and Scott are working with both the township and the city on site development. And so lots of exciting things going on. So that's our report for this week, for this finance meeting. Thanks. I can try to answer any questions if anybody has any. Apologize to the audience that I don't know if you could see me as I was talking, but we'll fix the problem and have a projector next time so you can see Mike's documents. And we want to still be able to have people tune in from home, but also be able to be in person. So thank you.
Okay. Looks like next on the agenda, we're discussing insurance versus bonding. I think you had a resolution. Yes.
Mike, I think, there you go.
Steve, can you mute yourself so that we don't?
All right, so historically in Ohio, and I think the law dates back to the early 1900s, that in public entities, there was the identification of an individual officer or someone in the organization where the authority or the responsibility for finances was placed. That ended up being with the treasurer primarily. There are cases in districts where other employees within the district are bonded. And that would be primarily those who handle cash and other financial related transactions and activities. The law has changed in that instead of, or in lieu of providing bonds, we can now obtain insurance, which would be through like the Ohio School Plan, which is the plan we use to cover all liability within the district. All of our policies allow for this, contracts allow for this. So in order for this to be enacted, what the insurance firm requires is a resolution by the board basically authorizing the bond to be replaced with insurance. It does not relieve any responsibility that I or others have relative to maintaining funds, fiduciary responsibilities, that type of thing. It just shifts the liability portion to the insurance firm who has the wherewithal and assets to pay any claims if they were to occur. Not that claims occur on a regular basis, but there are cases where things which are outside any one individual's control can occur. And the law basically recognized that and then was passed in order to make this change. So what I'm requesting is that, to be consistent with policy, contracts, et cetera, that the board adopt the resolution at the same amount of coverage that we currently have, which is $300,000. It would be rare that a loss would reach, I believe, that limit. In speaking with the Ohio School Plan, the individual who does the underwriting or discussed with underwriting said the typical district would carry about $100,000 of coverage, especially in the area of bonding. So I think 300,000 should be sufficient, but I am waiting for information back from them. They were not able to actually gather up any details on claims that have occurred in the last, say, few years. There was just not enough notice for them to do that.
I have a question. And I asked it and so I'm going to ask, I guess, again, if our policy allows, well, I have two questions, I guess. If our policy allows us to do insurance versus a bond, I don't understand why we would need to pass the resolution. And I think your answer when I asked that directly of you was that Ohio School Plans is requiring the resolution.
Correct.
If we do an amount, let me back up a little bit. What is the amount of coverage that they are recommending?
Well, they don't necessarily recommend. It really comes down to what is the board comfortable with in terms of having coverage. For example, we have $4 to $6 million coverage in general liability for various things, or we have a certain amount of liability coverage for buses and transportation vehicles, et cetera. There's pollution, all the various. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that they don't necessarily recommend an amount. What they told me was that, or at least the individual I was speaking with, that a district of our size and most districts, larger districts, carry about $100,000 in this particular area.
But you're recommending 300,000.
Well, that's what was initially contracted. That's what we have now.
So that, I guess,
Opposed to reducing it in order to maintain that level of coverage, it's a relatively small premium for the amount of coverage.
I guess my question is, were we being told that we had to pass a resolution only because we were going to reduce the amount?
No,
Then I still don't understand why we would need to pass a resolution if our policies allow us to sub the insurance coverage for the bond. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I can go back and push that issue and see if.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be curious, one, about that, but also two, I would like to know from them what amount. I mean, if you're saying that they say that districts of our size cover at 100,000, then that sounds to me like that's what they're recommending. But if that's not what they're recommending, I don't know. I would like to know what amount of coverage they're recommending and why.
Okay.
And the clarity about the resolution. It just, it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I don't think we did either. That's why, I mean, it's just confusing that we're handling it differently.
Okay.
Mike, I also asked directly, because what a insurance limit really has to have knowledge of in conjunction with that limit is, are defense costs included in the limit or are they outside the limit? And he did go back and ask, and the defense
Right.
costs are outside the limit.
Yes.
So that's a major question when you have that.
Defending claims, yes.
I have one question too. How does that play into, say, the auditor's office issues of findings for recovery? Does that kind of indemnify, say, the treasurer or the officer or whatever? Do you think?
Well, it shifts
The
responsibility
to the insurance company for the amount of coverage.
If there is an excess amount above the coverage, it would still go back on whoever is responsible
For the
for transactions. Because this covers
mistakes, calculation errors, any particular thing where it was determined that someone was paid incorrectly, for example, that could be a finding which would come back. With a theft that had occurred, then that could be potentially a finding, which is, again, outside the control of maybe any one individual.
Okay, did you want to go on into the payroll personnel?
yeah, so I will follow up.
Tomorrow and see if there's a rationale as to why they require this. And that's what they had told me in order to affect the change. One reason was that, for example, right now we have 300,000. Our policy has 100,000 for this type of coverage for others. And if we were to include me, then they need to do 300,000 for all or 100,000 for all. So we can't have different levels of coverage for different employees.
And I mean, I am not an insurance expert, so I have no idea what the appropriate amount is. That's why I guess I would think that they would be able to provide some insight and recommendation on what that amount should be. And if it's 300 versus 100, then they should all be 300, I guess.
And me being someone who's risk adverse, I always carry more insurance than I think I need because I want to make sure that I am covered, or the district is covered. I would tend to err on the side of more rather than less.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know what they think what the appropriate amount is. And then like I said, if it is 300 and not 100, then it sounds like everybody needs to be 300, but I'm still unclear about the resolution.
And the cost is nominal. When you
Yes.
think about it, right?
Correct. Okay, I will follow up on that. Okay, and just an update, as you know, we have a payroll opening at the moment for classified payroll. Last week, we had received a number of resumes. Last week, Michelle, my assistant treasurer, and myself interviewed 6 candidates via Zoom. We then brought 2 of those candidates in yesterday for second interviews with Shay in HR, plus most of my team. And the consensus was very clear. There was one individual that was, outstanding in that second interview. So we did make an offer last night. She has accepted, and she will be able to start on August 2nd. So in the interim now, we have, one additional payroll that Crystal, my admin assistant, will assist with in order to process, since we're down about 1.5 employees in the treasurer's department at the moment. And the team is doing an excellent job in maintaining the operation and chipping in and doing what they need to do in order to make everything work. So just as an update, I expect, starting August 2nd, but certainly there's a learning curve, as in any position. And as you know, school system payrolls and operations is a kind of a unique animal. It's very different than the corporate world. And to find someone with payroll experience in a school system is rare. So this woman is coming from the private sector, but certainly has the aptitude and ability, and I believe the drive and initiative to make sure she does a great job. So. And that's
That's all I had on the agenda.
there's other items that
Does anyone have anything? Okay. It looks like it's a 7:23, and I guess that concludes the Finance and Facilities meeting for today.
We made it.
Kinda.